Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is great. He is the youngest candidate running for Danville Town Council. He is a longtime Danville resident, graduated from San Ramon Valley High School, and he was wonderful to talk to. He has some good ideas and great visions about where Danville can go and how to keep adapting to the changing times, and again, has a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm and pride in just even in running. It was really cool to talk to him and hear about that. But without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Turner Stanton. God bless it, we made it. Thank you for coming, Turner.
Of course, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yes, how's your evening going?
So far, so good. We got clear air, which is a nice welcome relief. Who would think? COVID and now fires again. So
yeah, that's
one after another.
It's quite possibly like the worst combo. I understood surviving with my boys at home and my wife at home. It's like, all right, look, just don't leave the property. I did not anticipate cabin fever in the middle of the summer in California. It's like, no, you can't leave your doors. My dad lives in Alaska. You can get outside more than we've been getting outside.
Yeah, strange times all the way around. I think people are excited for 2021.
Yeah.
We'll see what is in store for that. But
I was working with a girl tonight on a college essay, and it was the prompt was asking about communities she frequents. And I said, you should say that you frequent the community of the living, because people have transitioned onto like technological beings and avatars. We don't even see each other anymore at all. And the more of every day that goes by, the more value in actually seeing a human being.
absolutely. And it's weird when I see people in public, that initial reaction is, even just now, Matt, you want to shake the hand. You want to give the hug.
Right.
And it's still just that instinct to do it, and it's weird not being able to do it still.
Right. But I think that's really analogous to what we're going to be going into in the next 24 months anyway, right? The things that we're used to doing, the things that are customary and we don't even think about. Like, why could you envision a time where you're meeting somebody, you're excited to see them, when you don't shake their hand? It's like you wouldn't even think about it. Exactly. But here we are. Like, you're not going to shake anyone's hand unless it's like just dipped in sanitizer for like the next 12 months. So leading into that, here you are. You're running for town council. Why?
Running for Danville Town Council in a pandemic year with forest fires.
Yes.
That's a whole nother thing, Matt. I mean,
where's the earthquake?
Knock on wood, that does not happen. But that's the big thing with this is, it's an unprecedented year. As a new candidate, the chips are already stacked against you. So now you're in this race where you can't do what you would typically do. I've knocked on a few doors for neighbors. They answer, and they can't tell who I am behind a mask. So
yeah, right.
It's a unique time also to be just a candidate for a local office. But ultimately, this has been years in the making. For me, public service is my passion. It's one of those things where I could do it 24/7. Being able to answer that phone call for somebody, say Matt calls me up and says, "Hey Turner, I've got this problem. How can we solution it?" Being able to be that middle person to say, "Oh, we got to contact this group or this individual," that just fuels my fire. And I realized it was through the pandemic, actually. Businesses were closed. There was no real path forward. This was back in April 21st. I remember the day so vividly. I was walking my neighborhood. It was 9 p.m. because that's the only thing you could do at the time was walk around your neighborhood or your parks.
Yeah, right. And you better walk pretty far away from the other person walking or they're going to get weird.
Yes, exactly. So I'm here walking neighborhoods I didn't even know were behind my house. And I thought, it's 9 p.m., it's pitch black, I have AirPods in, and I feel completely safe. What a community this is. This is unique. This is Danville. This is a community unlike any other. And then I started thinking about some business owners I knew and their bottom line. They were struggling. Revenue's down 80-90%. So I started kind of realizing, Danville is such a special place. What is our plan to make sure this is here post-COVID and to give everybody that fighting chance to not only survive it, but thrive coming out of it? So made several phone calls the minute I got back from the walk and realized, if we're going to not only recover but thrive, we need to be proactive now. So I wrote to the town council about this reopening effort, which focused on safety, saying, hey, if Matt Todd wants to do some in-class exercises, he's going to need sanitizer. He's going to need a reopening plan. Nobody's currently helping him do that. So let's jump in, see the county guidelines, and get our businesses ready to reopen. Because if they weren't ready, they would never be able to reopen. So I launched that letter at the town council meeting, met with the economic development director for the town of Danville, then our Chamber of Commerce CEO. So it formed into a Recover Danville Alliance. We then segmented all the businesses by different industry groupings, restaurants, retail, legal, community groups as well. And we helped them with reopening plans, get the PPE, and just in some instances to be that shoulder to cry on. Because when you're a business owner, you're facing everything alone most days. So just to kind of give that community spirit also was important. So through all that, Matt, that's really what made me realize the more I did it, the more that's what I love to do.
Right.
Being that person who, will make that call middle of the night and be there for them, roll up the sleeves and help them, because if we don't have that sense of community, we won't have a Danville. So it was those build up that made me really want to go for it officially this November.
Gotcha.
And when I announced, everybody I think said it's about time, because if you look at kind of my career and my life, I've always been public service focused. Starting back in the 8th grade, class president, San Ramon Valley High School, all 4 years president of the class as well. So people were not surprised by the decision to run, and neither was I. I think people were just surprised it took this long. So
that's interesting.
I'm really excited to be in this race. And again, keeping the public service aspect in focus and making sure, after November, Danville's better off through the election cycle.
Gotcha. Now, you graduated in 2012 from San Ramon, yes?
2013.
2013, okay. So what has been this progression through your adult life in public service where you have this real passion, this real emphasis? What happened for you, and what were you doing that really helped you explore this and realize, hey, look, I'm not going to go hard into, my own business. I'm not going to go hard into, the corporate world. I'm going to stay in the public sector.
Yeah, that's a great point, because, currently I work for one of the top 4 international professional services firms in their consulting practice. Prior to that, I was in the audit and assurance practice doing financial statement reviews. So that's a very different world than tabling at farmers markets, reviewing
Right.
general plans, doing constituent affair work. So it really was that high school experience, the middle school experience, being the class officer, serving on the Parks Commission for the town of Danville, and meeting the town staff and the members of the community to just kind of see there's such a desperate need, not only just Danville, but any community you go to. There's a need for somebody to always be able to reach out to. And in college, I worked in the Office of the Lieutenant Governor's office, and I was the main constituent affairs person. So that was another opportunity where I got to hear firsthand people who were really struggling. And it was just simple. They just needed to find the right contact. So it was that experience as well that further showed, there's such a need out there for people just to have somebody to listen to them, that I wanted to fill that need. So it's been a progression throughout middle, high school, college, and even professionally. Doing this Recover Danville Alliance just further showed this is what I want to do. And I've done our car show for about 10 years now here in Danville.
The hot August nights.
Hot August night. So it's things like that where it's always been kind of in the back of my mind, and I've always tried to keep up the public service aspect, even while in college, even while working for the firm currently. But this November, I thought I couldn't sit it out any longer. I needed to jump in, fully fledged to make the difference I really wanted to.
I gotcha. So you obviously have great aspirations. It sounds like you have a passion for public service going back into your, again, middle school years. And, you work for state politicians coming up through college, and now you're circling back. So it sounds like you felt a real calling personally to get back into this. What do you see as the biggest push, right? The biggest thing, like what would your top thing be in the start of your term?
Top thing is definitely the economic front.
Sure.
Our local businesses, I think the crown jewel of Danville really is our small town atmosphere and the downtown. So doing anything and everything we can to make sure, again, I say it a million times, they don't only recover but thrive, because we don't want our businesses just breaking even. We want them to, be making enough money to pay for their employees and have a good lifestyle as well. So that is a top priority for me, and that comes from being able to kind of just look at things in a different lens. I know there's a lot of energy with different businesses about different ideas they've had that just haven't got a chance to really be heard out. So I think we need at the town council level kind of that new perspective with the qualifications behind to really say, well, why haven't we been able to do this?
Like, if I may ask for specific, what do you think hasn't been heard out or explored?
A simple example is illuminating Harts Avenue, the lights up and down the street. I've heard from several stores and restaurants even that they would stay open later because it would be a safer atmosphere and an overall better experience for families and couples on an evening out. So I would want to understand, well, why haven't we been able to illuminate Harts Avenue? Is it a budget issue? Because Danville's budget's top of the state pretty much, where I think we're top 10. So I would want to understand, well, why haven't we done what, in my opinion, looks to be such a simple solution to help our businesses stay open and, generate some more revenue? And also, we don't just have Harts Avenue. We have the Livery, we have the Green Valley, we have several other centers in town. So I also want to assign liaisons amongst the 5 council members to our different business districts to make sure each shopkeeper, each development is getting equal representation. Because, again, going back to my constituent affairs work, a lot of the time people just think they're on their own. So I want to change that dynamic to make sure our business community knows we're all in this together and the town is here to fully support them.
Gotcha. And do you feel like there's a lack of support from the existing council that you would bring, this kind of, you'd fill the void that you see?
Yeah, I think there's a big need for more, we call it feet on the street experience, walking door to door consistently, checking in, saying, hey, Matt, what do you need? Everything going well, or any issues you're having, how can we further help you? So I think there is a big need to get more of our leadership down and around town very more present and proactive to be that conduit for them. Say, we've heard this issue at several stores or several restaurants or several areas. How do we solution it through our town resources? And a big thing, the reason I say business is such a priority is that bubbles up throughout our entire community. Our sales tax revenue is 22% of the budget. So that ultimately goes to our maintenance facilities, our ability to keep our parks in the pristine nature they are. So the reason business is such a priority for me is that is what influences the rest of this community. Our schools, our different programming as well. So if we don't have that revenue and a healthy business scene here in Danville, a lot of our top amenities that make Danville second to none, we wouldn't be able to service fully. So that's why that's a top priority for me.
Yeah. And speaking of schools, the Board of Education race is really, really intense. People are
busy.
Fired.
Yes.
People are fired up about that. What do you think is driving people to pay attention to that, besides obviously the distance learning?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things with COVID, even with the town council race, when you're at home and for me, again, in the business world, there's a lot of travel traditionally, but that's stopped indefinitely. So I think a lot of people have been able to realize what is happening with their child or with their community. So a lot more eyes are focused locally this year because it's become so apparent how important local office is. Because I think, traditionally people know the president, the governor, and they want to vote for that. But they don't realize how local officials, they impact your day-to-day life much more than some of these other positions that get all the attention. So I think due to COVID and everybody being focused and stuck inside in their own community, they've realized the school board has some major decisions that impact their child and their family. Same with the town council. There's some major decisions that are impacted, from streets to street lights to street closures, that really impact your every single day, whereas other national level politics, it doesn't have that same impact.
Right, and that is one of the things that people don't realize. It's like, look, whoever's on your town council is literally going to be lighting your street or addressing your sewer lines, paving your roads, putting in speed humps, dealing with, say, cell phone towers or schools and low-income housing and things like that.
Yeah, and the beauty of local is you can also call those people. You could get a cup of coffee with your council member or school board member, which I think is just, again, it's amazing how much of an impact local office has on people, yet they just haven't realized it. I think now, though, we have realized how important local office is because it does impact that day to day. So
Right.
that's also why I love the local scene as well, or the local level, because it's being able to have that personal connection. I can sit here right now with you and see your body language, connect with you at a human level, whereas the higher up you are politically or in different groups, you kind of lose touch with that. Whereas when you're living in the community you serve, it's a different relationship, different priority you have.
Right. Now, Danville, again, is more than the COVID situation. Danville is obviously more than the wildfire situation. So take it back like 8 months, right? Before we knew anything about, the Rona, what would you identify as things that Danville really needed to step up on or could really improve upon? Because it's easy to see now. It's kind of like, hey, look, we're all distance learning. Right? Hey, what are we doing for our businesses? They're struggling. But where were we at the start of 2020?
Yeah, I think the start of 2020, things were going according to plan. Again, Danville, our town staff, our town management, their budget, again, second to none. The operations are streamlined, contracted out, so we get a good bidding process. So things were on track, but I think there still was that gap at the community level, the representation for all different groups of people. The last 10 years, every mayor that's been in the Center Mountain High School homecoming parade, it's been because I've been asked who's the current mayor for the town of Danville. So I think there's been that persistent gap of just community engagement across all groups of people, not just kind of maybe some focus groups that people have been accustomed to be with. I immediately think of students. Through my campaign here, a lot of people don't even know we have a town council, let alone if they can name all 5. Or do we elect a mayor or is the mayor appointed? And also, what does the town council do versus our town staff? So that's another big gap of just the education piece of knowing who your local officials are. And in a town of 18 square miles, it should be easier for us to get out and meet all age groups of people, from students to senior citizens. So I think that was a big gap 8 months ago, pre-COVID. And that was my biggest thing. And I know a thing I hear consistently pre-COVID and now on the campaign trail of people just didn't know who the representative was.
Gotcha. So you feel like in general, at the start of 2020, things are going along swimmingly. There are no big scandals. There are no big issues. I mean, every town has its little bumps, right? Like Measure Y was a big issue.
Measure Y was a big one, and put to the voters as Measure S requires. So that was a big one, and I was glad it went to the voters because any land use change like that, based off Measure S, needs to. So I was glad that happened, but. There's some other incidences of, local. I know when we did our big rebrand for Live Locally, there was some frustration that it went out to a non-Danville agency. I believe it was a San Diego company. So there's also some things I've been aware of pre-COVID, pre-election of, well, if we're going to live local and support local, why not look to the Danville businesses to maybe do that marketing plan or that marketing pitch? So there are some other aspects that probably don't impact the average citizen's day-to-day life as much as we've now seen with COVID, but there are some other things where I think, again, it could have been improved upon and said, well, we love Danville, let's take care of Danville. Let's go with a Danville person first, if they're the better pricing, better quality.
Right. So speaking of taking care of all Danville residents, the price of housing here has been going up. Right, and justifiably. This is a beautiful place to live, incredibly safe, great facilities and staff. And one of the bigger issues, though, is that we run out of that housing that's more economically priced, right? So for aging residents or for young professionals, people who want to leave college, get a job, but they don't want to move back home, they still want to be in the area. I mean, if you're 22, 23, you can't afford a $2,500 apartment.
Exactly, yep.
So what do we do about that? Because it's not only affecting our residents that don't quite have as much money, but it's also affecting very gravely our schools because people are getting priced out when they're starting families, and that's leaving our schools really in a hole.
It's a big issue, Matt, because, you look at our house across the street from us just sold for $2.2 million. And a young family moved in there. So housing's a big issue, and Danville's in a unique spot of we are practically built out. If you look at our 2030 general plan, I think there's really only 2 parcels left in town where any potential development would be possible. The town of Danville just launched this accessory dwelling unit program. It's called the Cottage program. So If you do one of the town-approved options, you can build a small ADU, they call them, on your property. But those also are renting for $2,000 to $3,000 a month. So affordable housing, it's a big item here in town, and there's no easy solutions to it because it is balancing that. We are kind of that single-family dwelling with the bigger yards and properties, and being built out, it's just a hard balance in understanding how can we, as a community, maybe help out, because it does impact all aspects. And housing, I think, is an issue in all communities. And Danville's, again, it's unique as that single-family home.
Right. So what would some of the options be? Because it is a real issue. It's a big issue affecting our schools. It's affecting our community at large. It's affecting our aging residents that might want to sell their house but stay in town. It's affecting our residents who have aging parents and they want to move them into town. So what are some of the options? Obviously, there's no correct option. There's no right option. But what are some of the things you're saying? Look, you have to make a hard call. What would some of those calls look like?
Yeah, so I think that'd be, if elected, sitting down with our city planner and our city attorney and all of our really experts in the planning field and saying, Danville, over, I believe, the last 20 years, we've grown at a 5% rate compared to some neighboring communities where it's been 128% growth, some pretty larger numbers. So I would want to sit down with our experts in the field and say, here is the issue we have at hand of, younger professionals, senior citizens, where that's a major issue if they can't afford, a place post-college or in retirement. So understanding from them what the main options are, because they live and breathe this every single day.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And a lot of people don't realize we are regulated with a certain number of affordable housing units that need to be developed on an annual basis, and that's again, state regulated. Do you see the relationship with the state as a functional one? And what I mean by that is, take the cell phone sites. Okay, not towers, but the sites. That's something where we were regulated by the state as well. And the state was obviously trying to get us to do things that the town council did not feel were appropriate. And the town had to push back. How do you see your role with that as well? Do you feel like it's your job, it would be your job as the town council to always push back and say, hey, let's function more autonomously, or try to say, okay, well, let's pick and choose, or just really try to accommodate the state as much as possible?
Yeah, big and important question, Matt, because the development right here on Danville Road across from your office, that was, I believe, just 8 years ago now, because that was one of the first state housing mandates. They go in 8-year cycles. Mm-hmm. So what what I've been sharing with people on the campaign trail is we're coming up on that next 8-year cycle. So this is a question about housing that we really need to elect leadership for the town council who are knowledgeable on the issue, experienced, and will be able to stand up for what they believe in. And what my thoughts on that is, I think Danville is unique in that small town atmosphere, outstanding quality of life. We hear that all the time. So I think we can't sacrifice the historic nature and small town atmosphere for these different mandates. But what I've learned is the way the regulations have gone, it's no longer just financial components, because again, 8 years ago with Diablo development, from my understanding, it was the state would pull funding if we didn't do it. Now it's potentially, funding issues, but legal issues as well of, if you were to say, no, we won't do this, the state now has increased legal authority to ultimately force you to do it. So as a town council member, I would want to sit down, go to the experts and say, this is the Danville we know and love. We need to preserve that, hands down. There is a reason this is such a highly ranked city, one of the best places for quality of life. So how can we find that balanced approach to make sure we're not losing Danville today with these state mandates? I think local control is important. During my time in Southern California for college, I was a part of this transition of power for the Ontario International Airport Authority. It was a local control issue. At the time, LAX actually operated the Ontario Airport.
Oh, that's interesting.
Shocking. So the city of Ontario was saying, well, wait a minute, we're kind of not getting the treatment we deserve, not enough flights, services could be so much better, whereas LAX was pretty much saying, LAX is our bread and butter, we just keep this because it pays some extra bills. City of Ontario wanted local control of that airport, So I was there with the new CEO of the airport helping with that joint powers agreement, and we completely revamped the airport and put it under the City of Ontario's control. Flight destinations increased, the marketing increased, service offerings increased. So I got firsthand exposure of how important I think that local control, local access is, because you have such a bigger vested interest when it is in your community.
Right. And self-determination is one of those things that I really think the majority of Danville residents prize and value. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, look, let me deal with me. Let me either fly to the moon or explode. But either way, it's going to be on me. I don't want a lot of people guiding me and telling me what I can and can't do.
Exactly. And, it's a historic community. It's such a rich history here at the town, incorporating in the 1980s, and that's really when the population boom came once the freeway came through. So I think that's another big reason for it is we've got a unique town here. Harts Avenue, one-way traffic each direction. You don't have that elsewhere. So we just have so many unique assets that I think a lot of our residents, the reason they've moved here and the reason a lot of our residents stay for 20, 30, 40 years is because of the unique nature of it. So they don't want to sacrifice that, which I fully believe is right, because there's a reason, again, Danville is what we all know it to be.
Right. Do you think there should be a push to increase the population more than 5% per year? Or do you think that the way it stands right now, because one of the solutions that people have obviously put out is, hey, look, we need to increase our population, decrease the cost of our housing in order to get more tax revenue, in order to fill our schools back up, in order to support the downtown businesses, right? Because there's only so much you can pull out of the community. If there are more people here, obviously, more people go into the candy shop, more people go into Yogurt Shack and things like that. Do you think that that's something that we should be focusing on kind of as a priority, or do you think it's more, hey, let's keep the population growth very, very moderate and find out ways to support our businesses and other means?
Yeah, I think the big thing and a big push I would want to do if elected for council is, really making Danville a destination. So for the fiscal front, getting people to come to our town instead of driving by, and even making sure our Danville residents don't leave the town for a Friday night dinner, to realize we've got some top-tier restaurants and shops right in our backyard. There's no reason to go to our neighboring cities for restaurants or shopping. And also getting that word out to our neighboring communities as well, of saying, Danville's a unique place that you want to be at. And just through our tabling with the campaign on Friday nights on Harts Avenue, a lot of the people I met, they weren't from Danville. They were from our neighboring areas and, even further up in the North Bay. So really capitalizing, I think, on our assets and advertising that to make Danville that destination is where we can experience that growth that would be a win-win for everybody. Because if we get into, higher population growth, that then comes with, we need more infrastructure, more transit. Increasing that just has so many more levels of complexity that will be really decades of planning and development, whereas we can really make Danville that destination to spur our economy and continue to make it that desirable destination for our existing residents.
Sure. Here's a question for you that's, okay, so when I graduated from college, it was 2004, and then we had the crash, 2007, sure, 2008. Yeah. Then everything slowly ground back up. And now, obviously, things are getting turned upside down. And right before I went into college, we also had the dot-com crash, which was in 99, 2000. So I have personally lived through these really crazy
You're in that unique
swings.
Generation where you've experienced once in a generation.
We had the savings and loan crash in the late 80s and early 90s. We had all kinds of things happen. And at this point, it's really clear that businesses that put themselves in a position to really be subject to the changing consumer luxury, mm-hmm. right? So, for instance, let's make the businesses a destination for people from, let's say, Walnut Creek or Pleasanton or Dublin or something. That seems to me to be inherently risky, because now you're relying on not just your immediate area, but your surrounding areas as well. And as you see any contraction, it's like, look, I'm a restaurant and I need to snag everyone that likes this type of food in my immediate area and draw 10% from the surrounding areas. You're just at so much risk at that point. And it seems that if you could supply yourself more locally, that would be better. Which do you think would be better? To try to help businesses get the local the local patrons more loyal, or to draw more outside? Or do you think it has to be a combination of both?
I think a combination of both, because Danville, we got a great community. Look at, again, unfortunately, the darkest times is when we see the brightest lights of people coming together, and we've seen through COVID, through the fires, there's an issue. Danville residents respond like nobody else. It is just amazing how when there is a need, Danville responds to that. So I think, we have that strong base here in town who already wants to support our local businesses and our local communities. And even more so has happened, again, kind of like the school board question of why it's so focused, because people have realized how important it is to their day-to-day. I think more people locally in Danville have realized, we have those shops we didn't know might have existed, or we have more restaurants than we ever knew were here as well.
Right.
So I think capitalizing on our existing base and growing that here in Danville, while also getting others to come into town, would be the win-win.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And what I've also realized, Matt, too, is, as we shift to the digital world, you can't really beat some of the customer service I've seen downtown and at our livery and other business locations. So some things I've talked with the chamber and other leaders in the community is, how do we highlight the people behind the doors, that business owner who works 24/7, who really, they know every item in their shop, they know the history to it, they have a passion for it, because you don't get that by clicking the button online. So how do we elevate that as leadership for the town, as the chamber, as our community, to know who it is behind that storefront, behind that restaurant? Because the more we hear the personal human experience factors, the more people are even going to want to buy into that. Right.
The crucible of Amazon on the brick and mortar is just, it's horrific. I mean, you had the game shop downtown, and it's almost too much, right? Do you think that's something that that we collectively as a community could really address, or do you think it's because, how are you going to beat Amazon, right? And there's so much simple. Of our downtown needs that.
And a lot of people, who never were, maybe fully plugged in with Amazon, are now plugged in because of COVID.
Right.
They were locked in, so they adapted to the new world. So I think, though, there is a unique way to really keep our businesses open, because you can't just have a downtown with restaurants. You need that retail aspect to it, because a night out really is going to a dinner, strolling up Hearts, or strolling around the livery, having something else to do. Again, if we want Danville to be that destination, to be that night out where, you come downtown, go to the livery, have a great evening, it can't be just food and beverage. So making sure, again, getting the stories of the person behind that shop out there, making sure people know, it's not a one-click option, but it's an experience. I go to these stores downtown that pre-COVID I didn't. It's funny, for me, by getting involved to help the businesses reopen, I've become more of a local shopper than an online shopper. I haven't shopped online recently in a while because now that I know what downtown has to offer and our livery and other businesses have to offer, I think to go there first. So I think that education piece of, it might be convenient to click the one button, you'll show up in 2 days. It might be nice, but do you really know what's just downtown? The treasures to be found, that experience factor that I think people need desperately. I think we've realized when we were all shut down for that 2 to 3 weeks permanently of really just the grocery store run and that was it, people need that experience to get out and about and to live life. You can't live life in the screen 100%. So I think there's opportunity to make sure our businesses recover and thrive post-COVID.
So what does that look like? Because I love the idea of sharing the experiences, right? One of the first longer interviews I did was with Ruggie from the Growler downtown,
yes,
my good friend Mike Mitchell, who owns Danville Jiu-Jitsu, and you have so many real stories when you dig deep into trying to understand how somebody came to own this successful restaurant, or how somebody came to own, the barbershop, like Charlie's Barbershop, or Akira,
staples.
or
those are all staples.
Yes, exactly. And we don't want those to go away, but it's connecting with that person instead of seeing it as a commodity, like you're kind of saying, seeing it as an experience. How do we get that out? Because I think that's a beautiful idea, which is, hey, look, let's make the Danville people, the Danville business owner, the Danville experience part of the allure of shopping in Danville. But how do we do that? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, exactly. And it's ironic. This goes back to that Recover Danville Alliance. One of my big priorities was to get also students engaged in the effort, because again, students. I'm a younger person, so just graduated in 2013. So students have some great ideas. Our younger population has some great ideas. So in the student committee for that, they were talking about what they called the fan favorites. It's those businesses, kind of like you just mentioned, that are classic staples of Danville. And they said, we cannot let them go out of business. So their ideas, which I think are great ideas, is restaurants are successful. How do we pair them up potentially? Say you go out to restaurant A. Can we have a working relationship where, maybe you advertise with that restaurant table, or have a 20% off if you take that bill over to whatever retail store you have, to just encourage that customer, that individual, to go explore? Because if you don't get them in the door, they'll never experience that. And also another thought I have is the video aspects. As we were talking with increased technology, it's one thing to see a print ad or to see a picture of somebody, but to really get them out and about on video, on different medias, to tell that story so it can spread organically, that's another great way to get those moments out, to get people to actually go into that store or that restaurant.
Gotcha. What about in the near term? Because obviously you're saying, hey, look, restaurants do well, and we can pair up other businesses, like let's say we pair up Danville Music or anything like the candy shop or whatever, sure, with restaurants. Restaurants aren't really doing well right now. So
it's
what
a
do we do?
Phase right now.
Right.
We're lucky we're lucky to have nice weather. We're lucky that the outdoor season for summer has helped, because several restaurants told me when it was to go only, they were just breaking even. So now that they've gone outside with that increased capacity, they've been able to manage. My big concern is coming up here in the winter time, because again, it's almost like for me we're back in that April time period of the big unknown ahead.
Yes.
Will we be at 25% capacity, 50% capacity? Is it worth it for that restaurant to even have 25%? Because some restaurants here, we're talking two seats for 25%. So that's, in the short term, we need almost, again, another April of getting people together, safely or virtually, and saying, what is the plans, what is the guidance, working with the county to understand what is the timeline. Because we cannot go into this winter season with no reminiscence of what the future is. Because if our businesses lose the winter, the Q4, we're going to have a major disaster on our hands. So,
but we don't have any real... look, again, the sky could turn red tomorrow. We don't know what's coming. Like, we can ask the county, hey, county, what do you think? They'll be like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe this. They're like, oh, so maybe that. They're like, yeah, but maybe not.
Well, and that's why I think the smoke, it was a good kind of wake-up call to realize the nice summer, beautiful nights out where, you could be out all night long, or numbered days as we enter the winter. But I think there at least could be more dialogues and more, again, getting people on the same team and discussing and planning through. Because now that we're almost in October here, if people don't at least have a plan, you just can't have that. So,
but again, what is it? How can somebody have a plan? That's what I keep coming back to. So the uncertainty is just so damn real.
Yeah.
We don't, any plan you could have is meaningless. We go from purple to red to maroon. I don't know what the colors are, but the point is all of that changes, so we have schools considering things like, let's go hybrid, or let's go all in person, or let's go virtual. Whatever you say and whatever you start turning over could completely change by state regulations or county regulations tomorrow.
And that's what we faced with the reopening effort. It's, we had our plans in place, and then it was outdoor dining, which was delayed or happened immediately overnight. So there is still the potential, though, of having it, and this is where it almost has to be a business by business, rolling up the sleeves, working with them and saying, hey, Matt, at 25% you can have this many tables, here's your bottom line that you'll break. Is that financially worth it for you to even prepare for? If not, let's look at 50%, and then it will be. And then in the midterm, find out what they need to be doing for the to-go only so they could survive. If they're going to do tenting, that's another big thing. There's just nobody knows, even locally here, if tents should be done. $3,000 to $5,000, that's a huge investment. Will people want to sit outside? So that's where it really comes. I'm a big believer. The experts of a restaurant is the restaurant owner. Expert of the store is the store owner. Sitting down with them and saying, here's what we do know based off these categories of colors. What's it mean for you and your bottom line? And how can we help facilitate to the best of our ability?
Right.
Even if it is just saying to the county, we know there's X number of colors now with this new tier system. What does it look like? What would cause us to roll back? How quick would we roll back? Just having some basic answers so we can do those different tiered plannings, have the plan A, best case, plan B, roll back, so we are ready for the unknown. Because if we don't prepare, that's worse than just going into it completely unaware.
Yeah, it's such a...
And that's what keeps me up at night, is realizing there is no path forward currently, because it's just not being discussed. And
well, do you really think that the town of Danville and the town council is not discussing a path forward?
Publicly, I'm not seeing, I know we're still debating the street closure on Harts Avenue. I would like to see a public dialogue of what we're going to do for them in the wintertime. Will we allow the tenting to occur with the health department? Can you even do tenting with heaters inside? There's just some of those basics that, at least as still a member of the public, I'm just not seeing occurring. And talking with the businesses, they also aren't aware. I did my Zoom meeting for the candidate forum from a restaurant, and they had no path forward for what or when indoor could be occurring. So,
I don't think anybody knows when the indoor. Like, that's the nature of the unknown, right?
Yeah, but at least the options for it, or having somebody come by and say, hey, when we get to this color, here's how many seats you can have. They don't even have that basic down. Because, the big thing with restaurants specifically, it's staffing requirements too. It's food ordering, staffing. It's not just number of tables and chairs. It's a whole deeper operation that spans for weeks. So if they don't even have basics of knowing, when we can get there, here's what it would take, they will just be behind when they can actually do it.
Yeah, man. Gosh, it's... Again, every time I talk to somebody about it, it's painfully obvious that, like, God, our businesses and the livelihood that's generated from downtown is so greatly at the whim of things that nobody can control or predict. And I think the closing off of the street downtown is fantastic, right? Obviously, you have businesses that are now trying to get some money and revenue going when the smoke and air wasn't terrible, but there needs to be more of that, right? Exactly. There needs to be more innovation. There needs to be more thoughts. When they closed off Falls right around Harvest, that seemed like a great idea. I mean, you have this large outdoor courtyard essentially where you can go and have a good time and relax.
Yeah, it's that proactive leadership with the new mindset to realize, why did it take a pandemic for us to realize the biggest asset we have in this town is our outdoor downtown.
Right.
That's one big thing under my economic vibrance platform is commissioning that study of seasonally, if we do street closures further, when would be the most opportune timing, what it would look like. Because again, in the COVID world, it's hard to advertise for people to come down because of the safety. Right. But I think we still could have advertised more of saying, instead of Harts Avenue's closed, advertise it in restaurants and stores are open. Here's the safety measures we've proactively taken to build that customer trust factor. I think that was lacking with the street closure. So that's a big thing I want to do if elected, is look at for future opportunities with our outdoors and downtown of, if we are going to do closures, how do we do it right to generate that appeal and have people coming down, and also again build that experience piece into it. Instead of traffic cones and an old police car parked, can we make something maybe more aesthetically pleasing that could be modular to go up at a certain time, go down at a certain time? Because my other big concern, safety-wise, is if a vehicle, heaven forbid, accident, gas pedals hit or something, at the time when it first happened, it was just pure pieces of metal between a table and a car. So that's another big thing I want to look into, is what vehicle-grade barricades can we get to make sure it is a family-friendly, safe experience, so we don't do something retroactively when it's too late.
Right. We don't have some kind of tragedy where somebody was texting or not paying attention.
Exactly. So I think there's opportunity for that as well. It's just, again, the proactive saying, let's get ahead of this instead of reacting to when things have happened.
What other things do you want to get ahead of? Because I feel like you're a man who has ideas.
Yeah,
And I feel like we've touched primarily just on business and economics, but like, what is it for you? Because I get that you're into helping people, but like, why take this on? Why now? Why not just go
well, and
make money and get on with your life?
because the other funny thing, Matt, is people say, oh, you're gonna stop your job if you win the race. What a lot of people don't know is this job, I think, pays just over $10,000 a year. So it's not a full-time job. You cannot live off of town council jobs.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if you're in it, if you're running for office, you really need to be in it because you want to give back. So the other big things I have are safety. Danville's consistently ranked the safest city in California. So I want to be a part of that effort to continue to keep us safe, but increase the community engagement piece of that. So I know our police department, they do a great job pre-COVID with coffee and donuts with the cops. I want to do even more of that, engaging our citizens with our officers to really show them, they're just as equal members of this community as you. Change that narrative and make sure people realize, get the police with people, having that coffee, having that meal, to really humanize and again show that relationship piece, which I think would just further increase the relationship and safety. But also under safety, the bike master plan update we're doing right now, being that conduit to make sure, more sensors are installed at our stoplights. Because I've learned from several bicyclists, specifically on Sycamore Valley, if they go to that stoplight, it sometimes doesn't pick up their bicycle because they're not a strong enough frame, or the light will change mid-intersection because they're not pedaling fast enough. So I want to make us even safer for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists by increasing those different technology tools to recognize when a bicycle is in an intersection, so that time sensor is a little delayed, so they can actually clear the path before the other traffic's able to go through.
Yeah, cyclists in Danville, obviously a very, very hot thing. I mean, it's a very popular destination with the mountain. I love Mount Diablo and riding on it, and have lots of friends that do as well.
Yeah, go to Pete's Coffee any morning or any weekend, and it is like the bicycle setup.
It's the Mecca,
there.
man. It's where people land. It's a good time.
Yes.
So what about the safety for our teenagers, right? What can be done to keep them safe from things like smoke shops? What can be done to keep them safe in general in the town? Because, we have they're one of the most mobile and vulnerable populations at the same time. So do you feel like we're doing a good job with that, or do you think that there are steps we could take to improve upon that?
I think there's always steps that could be improved upon that. A big thing I did with high school leadership programs was being a part of, it was the Community Resource Network, different nonprofits that really looked at how do we, I think the key to helping teenagers in our younger population goes back to that engagement piece. At the time, it was called the San Ramon Student Ambassadors, and we had different committees based off different topics, such as smoking, drug and alcohol abuse, et cetera, et cetera. When we have student leaders who are tackling those topics and then working with the appropriate official or the appropriate resource locally, the results are just so much more positive, because it's kind of like businesses. Nobody knows what a high school or student is experiencing more than that high schooler or student. So that's where, kind of as a younger candidate, and my success when I was in leadership positions on our Parks Commission, on the Danville Youth Council for the town of Danville, we were able to make big strides at the student engagement piece because we were given an equal voice. So that's a big thing I want to do if elected, is get our younger population actively engaged and giving them that equal seat and equal voice to say, here are the issues you're facing. Share with us if you're willing, and let us see how we can best help. Because I think it's just natural, if resources are provided or if an assembly is held on a topic, that's great and all, but if there's no buy-in from the student, that just isn't going to have the impact. And
Sure.
We have such great programs and groups. Discovery Counseling Center, I immediately think of, Teen Esteem. So just getting more of that community engagement with the resources, the students, and the appropriate authorities to facilitate that process, I think that's the best way to tackle some of these issues. And that's my big concern also. Mental health was an issue when I was a student. And for these poor students, what they've gone through, I am really concerned about what I've heard with the virtual world. Students are depressed. I remember
horrendously, yes.
I called several students. I'm still very well connected, specifically with the high school. I called them the first few days of school. I said, hey, how's the first day of senior year, first day of junior year? All excited, energized. and the response, it was, you could just tell the tone was dropped,
Oh, they're deflated balloons, 100%. They're not even starting senior. Like, you mean I'm just logging onto my computer? I mean, this is not exactly what we're talking about.
And that's what absolutely kills me. And it's realizing there are major issues that have always been here with different age groups. Those are just going to be further increased due to the new world. So really banding together as a community, again, I would love to see that community resource network come back alive, because a big issue is not only the stigma associated. I want people to know, if you're having a problem, it is okay to seek help. I think there's, unfortunately, it's still out there, that perception of, if you're struggling, just keep it to yourself and try to power through. I want to make sure people know, it's okay not to be okay, and to get those resources easily available. Because when I had friends and other people I know who were having issues, it wasn't easy finding resources.
Right. I grew up in Concord, and we had a lot of people in the area volunteered at the Monument Crisis Center. And you have suicide prevention, and you have domestic abuse help, and a lot of help for younger people, which was very, very important. I mean, we're talking little kids all the way up through teenagers. Could you envision having something like that in Danville? I mean, it sounds like you're rightfully so concerned about the mental health of our young people. They've taken a beating. It's terrible to see if you sit down with any of them. They're really struggling. But outside of this, right, because it's so easy to focus just on the situation we're in right now, when, again, it's like beginning of 2020, end of 2021, we likely will not be in this situation. But do you think that the health of our young people is something that needs to be addressed on a town-wide or community level, the likes of which something like a crisis center or prevention hotline?
Yeah, and I think that's also where people who don't know the town council and how important it is, this is a perfect example of that. Within our 18 square miles, we can only have so many resources. So it is essential that the people we elect and the people we know, again, that's the beauty of local government. You, Matt, could call me tomorrow. I'll pick up the phone. That's how we set this up. So making sure we have elected officials who are connected with those different groups outside of Danville, so we can leverage that greater community group. And again, that's why the Community Resource Network, it went beyond Danville. It went into San Ramon, Walnut Creek, because there's just some top resources that are not in town. Whereas just because it's not in town doesn't mean we shouldn't know about it or have access. Another good group I know of is the Putnam Group. They help specifically people who are the working age, so a little older, but they have some great resources and really help the person throughout the day. So I think that community level engagement piece is essential to these pressing issues. And even at the school level, the school district, I know our students, when they work with the different high schools, different middle schools, the thoughts that come out, the knowledge that's shared, and the new ideas they come up with, it's just so much more powerful when you reach out and collaborate together.
Right. So you mentioned earlier on that communicating with the community is crucial.
Absolutely.
How do we change the communication that we've been having, which is increasingly toxic, increasingly misleading, increasingly difficult to navigate, especially for somebody who is interested in understanding all of the facets, without taking the 4 or 5 hours to watch every single town council meeting, without taking the 20 or 30 hours to watch previous town council meetings. Because, as somebody pointed out recently, by the time the average person sees something, like, say it's close to the finish line, they're like, hey, they're going to build all these houses over here or something. That issue has been on the table for years. And so then it's like whenever you go to one of those, any social media page, right, and you jump into a conversation, you're immediately dropped down to the most recent comments, right? And then you say, okay, but what about this? And then, of course, somebody immediately comes on and says, we addressed that on question like 20, and we're on question like 150. So to understand the history behind these issues and to understand the depth and nuance that was brought to the table, the compromises that were made, the resources that were pulled on to get the right answers, is so overwhelming for the average person. And then it's all reduced down to, well, Turner said this, so Turner doesn't care about these 20 things. It's like, okay, Turner addressed these 20 things like 2 years ago. Like we're all on the same page, and that guy that you're saying Turner's screwing over, he's actually on Turner's side. You're just not. So like, how do we change the communication on a community level so that we don't just provide facts, which is like, here are the facts. Here are 7 binders that are 2 inches thick each.
all of the facts,
all the facts are in here. Have at it, baby. Everything you could possibly want to know, because that's so burdensome. People just won't do it, and that's when the ease.
Matt. That's where it becomes the town's responsibility and the town council's responsibility to streamline those communications, make it more bite-sized, because the binders you just mentioned, the struggle is real. They are real. When I first filed, I requested from our city clerk, I go, I would like the physical version of the budget binder, because the PDF online, you scroll for days. So I said, could I get the physical version? So I got that. I then got our physical version of the general plan for 2030. Then the overall operating procedures. I mean, you have probably 1,000 pages to review. The average citizen should not have to do that. So that's where it becomes a communication issue, and also a community participation opportunity. Like we were saying earlier with the school board focus, I think the more we can get people knowledgeable of who their leadership is, because again, we have 5 council members, realizing their phone numbers, their addresses are publicly posted on our town website. So knowing that people, you can call your council member and meet for a coffee if you're that invested to an issue, or you can send them a direct email. And I know there is a frustration with people of not hearing back from council or from staff. So at a minimum, an easy, quick win for that is, being that council member who's going to answer the call, give the email back. At the broader level, when we're in the social media channels, at the several-hour council meetings, again, I kind of go back and look at the video components of, is there a way we can, because have you been through some of our council meetings?
I have not had the pleasure of sifting through them. So I quite unfortunately work in the evenings with students, so it's hard for me to
timelines don't work.
Well, I mean, the other problem is that we're trapped at home. So I have 3 little boys, right? I work in the evening, and then when I do get home and I'm home in the morning, it's not like I'm sitting down at my computer to sift through it. Like, I got the 4-year-old attacking me with some plastic thing, and the 6-year-old screaming because his Zoom isn't working. Like, it's not a very calm and gentle process that I'm going through right now.
Yeah, and power to you, Matt, because I know a lot of this community is in that boat, and it has been a challenge. The council meetings, there's a lot of administrative components to it. So if there's a way we could just push out, again, the more fact pieces, whether it's another quick video. I'm a big fan. I think people need to see and hear a person, or see and hear the staff report out, but in that quicker format, or a one-pager. Our town staff in the housing specifically with this next 8-year allocation, they did a great job with their PowerPoint one-pager of the different options on the table. So just making those one-pager quick information kind of fact sheets readily available, I think that's the way we can get kind of the information as needed to the people. But also the community engagement's a big piece. Knowing your council is here as your elected official, and you can call them, email them directly.
Right, but okay, I dig that, because I think having those smaller videos, and like when Bernie Sanders was running in 2016, he did a really good job of making these small 60-second videos that outlined his priorities for certain policies. Now, I'm not saying I liked his policies. What I'm saying is he was very effective at conveying ideas quickly and effectively. And you're like, okay, well, this is obviously where he stands here. And I didn't see that from a lot of the other candidates. He was really skilled at, using his words correctly and being sensitive to time. But it also betrayed a lot of the detail. So he's like, look, I want to make college, available for everyone. It's going to be free. It's going to be great. We're going to tax the people with the money, and we're going to pay for the college. The whole time is heads in his sternum. But the point is, he says these things, and you're like, okay, I like the idea of affordable college. I mean, there are a lot of states like California that have really affordable college. And DVC is free for the first year for any Contra Costa resident. That unit at DVC that you get is the same unit at UC Berkeley. It's the same unit as USF. It's the same unit at USC. I mean, obviously there are some nuances to transferring credits, but It's the same thing. You go to a year of college there, take a full schedule. It's a year of college somewhere else. So we want slightly easier communication,
yes,
right? Slightly easier access to information, but it's a problem because the details then get muddied. We don't know how, right? Like, we're going to increase housing in Danville by building in a small portion of, the Hat McGee or whatever, McGee Ranch area. But when you get these crazy campaigns throughout the community to stop this stuff, right? When you get people offended by a certain project, when you get people worked up over something, and then all of a sudden the misinformation starts flying, that's when I don't think any council member could hold a regular job and respond to the whole community outreach, right? Like, because you just can't stop it. It's like steering an iceberg, right? Or, you just, it's like, how do you do it? How do we navigate this? So how do we make shorter, easier, tastier little nuggets of information, but also find a way to stop once that ball has started rolling? Once we have this toxic communication, once we have this huge spread, like, again, with Measure Y, that blew my mind. Like, how have people are going bonkers over this thing, and there was no really easy way to point and say, okay, these are the details, right? Like, just watch these 10 60-second videos, exactly, and you can take that word to the bank and we're good to go.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly it, is, having, again, I'm a big believer in the ability of the bite-sized information that has the fact base as the foundation. Getting that out there, again, ahead of time, getting it ready. Because, again, for this next 8-year housing allocation, we already know the legal components. We know the options on the table. We know, if we go with it, what that would look like. If we want to stand up and say, we're going to decline, what those implications are. So we could be doing that right now, making it that bite-sized information ready to launch and getting it in an easily accessible location. Because another issue we have is, I think this is unfortunately just what's happened with all social media, there are just so many platforms right now as well, Matt, that if you go to a Facebook page, the next door, the website, it's not all the same information at the same time. So I think that's another thing, is as we push information out, it needs to be pushed out to all the channels at the same time, so it's a consistent message.
Right, a united front.
Because I know, some people, Facebook's their sole source of information or engagement. So if one post only goes out to next door but not Facebook, they're going to miss it.
Right.
The town website, if you don't know the right tile to click and then right subpage and then the right folder of that, you'll never find it. So how do we even make the people who go to our website, once they hit our landing page, it's easy to get that information they need?
Right.
That's another big thing, is just streamlining communications to make it that united, single communication across all platforms.
Right. That makes sense. So speaking of housing allocation coming up, what do you like about that plan? What do you think needs to be improved?
Well, and that's a good question, but they're currently still debating it. So we have our state housing board, and then we have what's called ABEC, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and they are the ones who ultimately, from my understanding, again, not being a sitting council member, I'm not privy to everything going on behind closed doors, but from my understanding, watching the council meetings, there's 3 options at play. And one has, several thousand housing allocations to, lower numbers. So there's 3 options on the table. We just had the Mayor Summit 2 or 3 weeks ago now. So the Contra Costa County mayors met, and they, I believe, shared back to the association of, based off our regional growth, here's realistically what we could do numbers-wise. So the association is now reviewing the different input from the representatives, and they'll be coming back with kind of their final recommendations. So I am excited to kind of stay plugged into the process and see what is going to come out and learn more, because from my understanding, the people who decide how many units, they kind of do it in their own, black box. It was even said in the council meeting, there's 3 black boxes. So I kind of want to learn more about the overall process and, what the requirements are going to be, because that's still, it's in process, but it's still not finalized of what we're going to be ending up with. So That's something we need to stay vigilant and stay on top of, because if we're not aware of the options in play, we could be surprised one day. So,
Sure,
staying
sure.
on top of that and just being aware of what's going on.
Gotcha. Now, what about the budget? Because the budget has taken a big hit, and they had to make some tough calls. Do you think they made the right calls?
Well, and on the budget front, a lot of our cuts, again, our town staff, I've worked with them through the Parks Commission, Economic Development. They work so much and do everything they can for Danville, and they're the ones who make things work. They are our maintenance team. They're the Economic Development. They are the ones who really are in the trenches, making sure the council vision is implemented. So a lot of the cuts the town made this year were at the staff level. So, there were some reductions in staffing. So that is just hard to see because, again, I know how much they put into it and how much work they already do. So that's been a big, it's been hard because the level of service expectation for Danville does not decline.
Right.
So
you go in and apply for a business permit, or you apply to build and anything you want. I mean, you still expect speedy responses.
Exactly. So that's been a big area. I know our maintenance programming, that was another area we got larger cuts in, and I think that's the right direction because, you could, based off the triaging of different projects, you could, maybe delay this project by a year and it won't materially have an impact. So that makes sense, and that's smart. That's smart budgeting. But we're lucky in Danville that 60% of revenue is from property tax. And, knock on wood, so far the real estate market here has been very strong. So that 60% slice has stayed intact. Where we really got hit and why we had to make the cuts was sales tax and gas tax because nobody was driving. So that's why, going back to one of our first questions on priorities, getting our local businesses recovering and thriving is essential, because that 22% of the budget, that's what we need to really make up. But, our town manager said at a council meeting, it's a 3-year road to recovery to get to our pre-COVID revenues to do our town operations. Because we also lose, we generate a lot of money through our programming, our different summer camps, the different art programs we do. So kind of figuring out how we can monetize those in a virtual setting or what we can creatively solution to make up some of those gaps also will be needed going forward.
Yeah. And again, it is difficult to see, obviously, the people that are working for the town getting cut, and obviously they didn't do anything wrong. And that's one of the bigger issues, obviously, that I think everybody's experiencing, which is, hey, it's not like I ran my business poorly. We were humming along just fine before all of this hit. But it is one of those things that you have to square with, even though you're not responsible for it. What do you see as the future of our parks? Because you worked in that area, and there are some things that I see. For instance, the Hat McGee. There's that little dog park there.
Sure, love that place. Yes.
Love that place. Now, that place went through like 3 revisions back to back to back. I mean, they put in grass, then they put in Dan bark, then they put in like some grass, and it was dirt, and it's just this huge mess. And my wife, I mean, we have, again, little kids, so we were always going to the park, and we're like,
you have a dog at all, or just
no.
No dog. Okay, so you
God,
add a puppy to the mix, Matt, and then you
keep it to yourself, sir. I don't want any dog
hopefully
conversation.
Your children do not watch these
oh my
or
gosh.
listen to these back.
No,
otherwise.
they don't. Gosh, that'd be. I have fish. And it's already too much. But do you feel like that's an area where we could have more efficiencies as well? Because it's like you just put in sod, and now you ripped out all the sod. And now you're pumping in all this tan bark, and then now it's like muddy. So what is that? Is that poor planning, or is that good intentions and then poor execution? What was that?
Yeah, that one specifically, I'm not sure why the triple changed, because during my time on the Parks Commission, at the time it was the big Osage Master Plan update. So any change that occurs at our parks or at our town, really, it goes through a pretty intensive process, because the commission will review something, again, if it's at plan level, so the entire master plan will be reviewed by the commission. We would then recommend up to council would review and vote on to approve or deny. But some of the smaller maybe maintenance projects like turfing, etc., that could have been a maintenance decision, but that one I'm just not well know enough
Sure.
to advise on. But I think there's opportunities across the board to increase efficiency, and it really is just saying, let's take this as a learning moment and saying, why did this happen this way? And if there is a good reason and it's saving money or, whatever the rationale is, okay, maybe it makes sense. But if it was an inefficiency, why, and how do we make sure that doesn't happen again?
Gotcha. So beyond the COVID thing, right? The COVID thing. That's a terrible way to say it. It is a thing though, because people just, it's what everyone focuses on. But I have faith that Danville and the surrounding areas will come out of this strong. Let's say it's a 3-year plan.
Yep.
What do you see the big picture? Like, what are you excited to be part of that Danville you see could develop into or be part of that you haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, I immediately look down at Harts Avenue and I look to our parks. I see, kind of growing up, the best moments of childhood were those trips to Disneyland with your whole family. So I really see, and I'm excited to have Harts Avenue, to have our parks, really that place where I call it the young and the young at heart, all the generations living and thriving together. So that's what I'm excited to be a part of, because I think you're right, Matt. If there's any community I'd put on money to get out of COVID stronger than they entered, it's the Danville community, because the residents of Danville, again, time and again in a crisis, rise to a level nobody else experiences. So I'm excited for Danville's future, and I'm excited being that younger candidate to inject an energy into the town council that really says, we've done things this way, for decades, and there's a reason we're at the moment we are. We're not going to throw that away. That's not negotiable. We need to keep our fiscal responsibility and the other cornerstones of Danville, but why haven't we done these things? Why don't we illuminate Harts Avenue? Make it that destination, that experience where you can have a nice night out, go to a shop, go to a restaurant, be there with your kid, be there with a grandparent. So I'm excited to be a part of that, being that younger person to say, why haven't we done it this way? And not be afraid to ask those questions. And again, just, bringing all members of the community at the table, getting our students that louder voice, getting our younger families that louder voice. If you look at the people who have moved into Danville, it is typically a younger family. So making sure, what their lifestyles are like are represented in this town. And again, that goes back to our parks and our downtown opportunities. So I am just really excited to bring that energy, proactive leadership, and that new perspective that I think we need for this next generation of Danville. Because that's another big thing. What people don't realize, school board gets so much attention, but this race for the Danville Town Council, it's a high-stakes race, because we got 3 seats for grabs. The next election's in 2 years for 2 seats. This is really what I see it as. This is the election for Danville's future. If we don't get kind of that newer person in there who's grown up in the community, who has that unique experience and that love for the town, we need to get them in there now so they can learn how Danville became to be the Danville we know it is today. So I'm really excited to hopefully be that steward to learn how Danville became the Danville it is today, while also taking us for the next generation, making sure that continuity plan's in place and really making this that destination.
Yeah. Well, again, my wife and I moved here specifically because we loved the schools and we loved the area. So we moved here in 2012, right at the bottom, and we barely squeaked in. So it worked out for us, but to know that that's really off limits for a lot of other small, younger families it's just a bummer. It's one of those things where you feel like, we're not going to, if we all age out of this place and we don't take care of it, then again, we are going to lose a really big portion of the opportunity.
Exactly, and that's why it's such a high-stakes race, because at some point the next generation leadership really needs to learn the Danville way, so the components and the community we love is here for that next generation. Because if we're not vigilant and if we don't stay on top of that, there's no knowing what Danville will be like. So it really is a high-stakes race for that next generation.
Right. And even if we don't know what it will be like, we know that it won't be as good as it could be. Exactly. And I think that's what we all want. We want the best possible Danville.
Absolutely. There's a reason, again, my family, we moved here when I was in the first grade, and it was the same reasons you and your wife moved here. The schools, the parks, and it was going to that downtown. So leveraging and realizing we've got this unique community. And the other thing, Matt, is it is our businesses, it's our parks, but it really is it's the people. It's knowing that the shopkeeper lives 5 doors down from you. It's knowing everybody here has such an invested interest in keeping Danville how it is, and making it an inclusive area for again the young to the old, and our veterans, making sure it is that community where we all look after each other and say, we love Danville, what can we do to make it even better? That's critical.
Right. The tiles over at Oak Hill Park, leading up to the flagpole, fantastic. I mean, my dad flew helicopters in Vietnam, as did my uncle, and my grandfather was in World War II. I love that. I love that aspect. And the Veterans Memorial, I mean, it's fantastic to see that kind of pride and that kind of respect that we have within the town, especially considering that some surrounding areas are not as quick to appreciate sacrifices of some. So
well, the 4th of July parade is one of the hallmark events for Danville, and that
man, how depressing this year that we didn't have that. It killed me. We usually sit right outside Danville Jiu-Jitsu and throw water balloons at the Little League kids and have a great time.
Well, that's one of my first Danville memories, was being in the float for the Danville Little League All-Stars. And, we've done this series through the campaign called I Love Danville, and it's funny, the one we released tonight was a community member who talked about the parade.
Right.
And how disappointed he was it couldn't happen. And I think the parade, the thing that's so special is that sense of community. For that whole moment, everybody's just Danville together. It's a special day. We celebrate our history, celebrate each other, and really build each other up. And, on the veteran front, I always knew Danville was a special place with our Vets Hall and our support for those who have served. My brother, he did a tour in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and I gained a completely different level of appreciation for this community, because when he came home, it was a homecoming that, it was just overwhelming. Our whole family to this day, everybody who was involved in that. I remember we picked him up at SFO. You haven't seen him for months. He's been through some pretty major stuff.
Right.
And to have people from this community join my mother and myself at the airport terminal to welcome him home, give us an escort, to drive by the high school, to have the high school government and leadership program come out and line the streets to welcome home their alumni and their resident, that blows me away and kind of gets me a little choked up even talking about, because it's moments like that, and then to get home, to have an American flag draped on our garage door, to have our neighborhood packed with police, firefighters, neighbors, little children waving flags, welcoming this veteran home. That is Danville. That is a unique sense of community that a lot of other places just don't have. And it's one thing when you see it and you participate in it, but when you're on the kind of the backside and it's a member of your family, that really hits home. So it's that Danville just sense of community appreciation that is second to none, and that's why Danville's future is bright. Right. We are in this COVID thing.
What a trashy way to say that.
COVID.
COVID thing.
And then fires. It has been a rough year by all means.
Right.
And to see Danville residents, we've had several students on their own, Matt, raise money for our businesses. We've had students send care package. We've had people start letters to senior citizens programs. That is what's special about this Danville community. And that is why I am so excited to get through this year, or through COVID, or whatever the milestone is for us to get, back to somewhat normalcy, because if elected for the council, there is so much potential that we can just further tap into and rally that Danville spirit of those hallmark events and make it a day-to-day occurrence. It doesn't need to be just on the July 4th. There are opportunities to make that sense of community throughout the entire year.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, listen, we've almost done an hour and a half, Turner. I appreciate
Matt,
it. It's almost
these are
9
great.
o'clock.
This is a great event. I didn't even realize we were here this long. So.
I know. It's like a black hole here.
Matt, for the people listening, I just wanted to personally say thank you for this forum. Thank you for all you've done, because as we're talking, it's a unique time to be doing a campaign.
Yes.
And if you don't hear the candidates at an extended length, if you know, because coffees are even difficult.
Right.
The forums you've done for the school board, for the council, even your other podcasts. Everybody listening, check out all of his other work. It's really good.
Don't feel obligated, please.
But Matt, genuinely, thank you for this opportunity, because
Absolutely.
this helps people know who they are voting for. And that's the other plug I'll put in is make sure you not only vote presidential. We're going to have great turnout for the presidential election. But everybody listening, please flip your ballot a few pages, vote school board, vote town council, vote in every box you can, because the local leadership, they're the ones who impact your day-to-day.
Very well said, Turner. I appreciate it.
And also, Matt, we've got, if people want more information.
Yes, please.
I've got a website. It's www.stantonfordanville.com. And we are extremely active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So just search Turner Stanton. Every time we're at a farmer's market event or at a local business, we try to do a Facebook Live video. So there's just some further opportunities for the people listening to, again, see who I am, what I'm about, and, you know, why I'm in this race.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll post that in the description. Is that Stanton 4 as in FOR?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So Stanton4danville.com.
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, again, thanks, everybody, and thank you, Turner, for coming tonight.
Thank you, Matt.